Miles Kahn, you are one of the producers and writers on Full-Frontal with Samantha Bee on TBS. It's a really funny show. It's really made its mark on television in these political times, in these times politically. How did the feel and structure of the show come about?
Um, that's a good question. Kind of organically, when we first started TBS, they kept saying, "Well, how is it going to be different from the Daily Show? And what's the show? And what's the format?" We just kept telling them like, "Oh, it's going to be really, it's going to feel different. It's going to look different." And we just kept saying it until we could figure out exactly what that meant. We knew it was going to be different. We always knew Field was going to play a big part in the show. We knew that we would have at least a couple of acts of ranting and raving and other kinds of more urgent comedy. TBS was actually, to give them a lot of credit, we didn't want to do breaking news every show. We thought because we were once a week, we could get away with doing longer term, bigger, meatier, deep dive kind of stuff, which we still do in our second acts. And TBS kind of encouraged us to say, hey, look, there's a lot of breaking news. The election's coming up. And we realized we couldn't ignore it either. So it just kind of naturally, everything kind of came out where first act was our breaking news, our more immediate stories. Our second act was always something that we figured we can sit on for a couple of weeks, something, or maybe that's a month or two in the works. And then the field pieces, they're the longest term things that kind of take time to build. And it kind of came together pretty quickly. We knew we didn't want a guest. We knew we had 3 acts to fill, and we kind of figured it out.
So, as you said, the show came on. When did the show premiere again? It was 2015?
2016 or 2015.
Well, it was in the midst of all the election madness.
February of 2016, I think, was the premiere.
Okay. So you have this show coming on, premiering in the midst of this insane election that is unlike anything that we've experienced before. And of course, it all culminated in election night 2016. And I'm very curious, what was your election night like?
It started out sort of, hey, this will be fun, and then it turned into just whiskey sadness.
Were you with the other writers from the show, or the other people from the show?
Well, there was like different offices. So there was one office where a lot of the writers and producers were watching the live feed come in, and there was a very distinct change in the mood. The first states got called for Trump. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, Kentucky, yeah, he's going to get Kentucky, that's fine. And when he started getting some of the bigger states, the toss-up states, the mood just soured to the point where, by 11 o'clock in the evening, if you walked you had to leave that room. Like, you couldn't stay in the room for more than 15 minutes and not feel, it was like a Dementor from Harry Potter was in the room, just sucking all of the energy out of our lives. Because we had planned a sort of a celebratory, fun show for the next night. We had Lizzo, the R&B soul singer, she was booked to do something fun with us, and Sam had picked out this sparkly blazer she was going to wear, and we really had written a very different show. My team shot a field piece that day, coming out of the polls and talking to people. So we had an inkling of what was going to happen, much like most of America did, and everything had to change on a dime. So we didn't have time to stew or be depressed or figure out what the hell that all meant. We had to basically stay up all night and rework the entire show from top to bottom, including the field piece, which to me was remarkable that we had one thing going in, and then we had enough footage to make another piece out of it that we didn't expect we were making. That was kind of fun.
That was actually going to be my very next question. How did the results affect your preparation for the show? Is that the craziest turnaround you've ever had to do with an episode of the show?
Yeah, probably, because the results came in so late that it was like when we realized, all right, we have to rewrite this. It was probably around midnight or so. We've certainly done our fair share of late night writing sessions when there were debate nights or when there was a late breaking news story. This probably is still the quickest turnaround for the entire show. For first, second, and third act, everything had to be redone. Certainly when there's a news event that breaks really late, we want to do it. It might be a 24-hour turnaround, but that might just be one act. Doing the entire show over, except for Lizzo. Lizzo, we decided do your song. Like, let's do it anyway. It'll be cathartic. And it was.
So before you worked on this show, you were a field producer for The Daily Show. And I'm wondering, how did you come about that gig? Because those were some of the most enduring pieces from The Daily Show, were those field pieces. How did you get that gig?
I got that gig through the magic of reality television. I did a lot of terrible reality TV early in my directing days, and I eventually worked with some really good people who knew some really good people, and I'd always had my eye on that job. I always was a huge fan of the show, and I'd always watched those field pieces saying, that's what I want to do. I can do that job. And so maybe I Oprah secreted it a little bit and just thought it and made it happen. But somehow I met someone who knew someone who knew someone, and I auditioned for the role. I did my first field piece, and literally the night my first field piece aired, somebody had to drop out of doing a field piece that was shooting in Denmark, and they said, do you want to go to Denmark? I didn't even have a contract with them or anything yet. I said, sure, I'll go to Denmark. So I had to go shoot in Denmark immediately, and then I stayed there for 10 years.
So I just blanked on what I was going to say. What's the craziest experience you've had doing field work for The Daily Show?
Oh, gosh. Denmark was certainly throwing me into the mix really quickly before I knew what the hell I was doing. It was my first piece with Jason Jones, and literally the first thing I did in the morning in the winter was I slipped on a rock. We were shooting on a right outside by the river, and I slipped on a rock and fell into a river in about 10 degrees weather and dropped the satellite phone that we had. So that was my first experience to shooting internationally with The Daily Show. I feel like that was pretty outstanding. I had shot some really crazy stuff with Jason Jones. I've seen Jason Jones naked too many times really to count at this point. It doesn't always make the cut either. He just somehow manages to, his genitals will come out, and then we just, okay, it's going to hit the cutting room floor, but it's a fun bit. He had me do a stunt once, which is still one of my favorite pieces, where we were doing a piece about a toxic lake in Butte, Montana, that they had turned into a tourist attraction. It was like a mining runoff lake, and it was one of their many tourist attractions in Butte, Montana, which was, of course, ridiculous. So the cats to the story was scientists were studying the water in the lake, and it may actually cure cancer. So the microbes were so fierce in there, they thought that maybe it was a cure for cancer. So I dressed as Jason Jones's grandmother in like a gray wig and like a gown and everything. He pushed me in a wheelchair down an embankment into a different lake in Butte, Montana. That was an actual lake, but just didn't scope it in anything. Did my own stunt, hit the water, flew in the air, and just belly flopped on top. And I think that was maybe my fifth piece in. All right, so that's good. This is my job now.
So you said you did a lot of work with Jason Jones. Did you have any role in I think probably the two most infamous ones he did, his trips to Iran, which for covering the elections there, and also the trip he did to Russia, which included a very surprising interaction with Mikhail Gorbachev.
No, I unfortunately didn't do either of those pieces. The Gorbachev thing was amazing. We actually used the same fixer who got Gorbachev for that piece for our Russia piece. I ended up going to Russia with Sam late. So I unfortunately didn't get to travel with him on those pieces, but I got my experience later with Sam, which was great.
Those were some great pieces. And what I was going to say is that one of the things that has actually endured from the beginning of The Daily Show has been these field pieces. And that's one of the few things that Stewart kept as he as he took over the show. And ever since then, it just sort of took on this whole crazy new vibe. I'm curious, what's the most entertaining decline you've ever gotten from anybody while trying to set up an interview? Because I'm guessing that you must have, that for every person who eventually agreed to go on it, there must have been a ton of people that were like, no.
Yeah, and that hasn't changed here at Full Frontal. There is a strong, a very wide ratio, hit to miss ratio when it comes to booking guests. I mean, at this point, we barely even reach out to people who are so ideologically far from what we want to do just because they don't trust us. The most entertaining decline, though, I think one time I can't remember who it was, but it was just a flat out, it was a celebrity, a conservative celebrity of sorts. And after a very nicely written, worded email, very polite, want to listen to you, want to hear you out, really want to just tell your story, it was just no, period. It was like, all right. No.
Simple.
Yeah.
So you've actually, besides the field pieces you did, you've had roles in two very big events that happened. One was, it's hard to believe, it's almost 7 years ago. You were part of putting together the Rally to Restore Sanity and or Fear on the National Mall with Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert. And then just a month or so ago, you were, with Full Frontal, you were involved with putting on the Not the White House Correspondents' Dinner at DAR Constitution Hall. I'm wondering which of those was more, what were the difficulties for both of those in terms of putting those things together, and which one do you think was more difficult to put together?
Well, to be frank, as a field producer at the rally, I don't think we had a real field piece on the air. So I was there in a support way, but I didn't, other than interviewing people in the crowd, the field team had a diminished role at that. I can speak to how hard it was to put together, and it was exceedingly difficult because none of us had ever done an event like that. That I don't think any of us in any of our respective jobs had done something that large to a live crowd. And I think the logistics of how many people are going to show up, how do we fashion a show that plays to this audience as opposed to our TV audience, that was the biggest challenge. And that challenge carried over a little bit to what we did in DC, where we wanted to make sure that the people in the actual audience itself at the Constitution Hall were entertained, but that the jokes would be wide enough for what might be a larger audience than usual for our show. We said we're speaking to a new crowd of people. We can't rely on some of our insider jokes that people might all know, but we want it to be something bigger and broader, a bigger, broader version of our show, sort of a supersized, extra special version of our show. I am shocked, but maybe I shouldn't have been, at how well it went off for us. It's one of those things where you rehearse it and you're not really sure if it's going to work, and then it's like high school theater. If you've ever done high school theater, nothing works up until the curtain goes up and the lights go on, and you're like, oh, literally everything worked as planned, if not even better. All the elements really, really came together. And I think the biggest challenge was just, I think, meeting the expectation of the audience. The audience was so amazing. The audience was it was like they crushing us with like enthusiasm and support. And like, we have to be as big as they are. They were so, so incredible. And I hopefully think we matched them in their enthusiasm.
Where did the idea come from to have Will Ferrell come out as former President Bush?
I think that was Sam. It just kind of came out in a meeting, went like, we should just have him do this. I'm like, all right, we'll ask him. None of us knew him. Sam and Will had never met before. I don't think they'd ever really had any contact. None of us on our staff, I think, knew Will really. So it was just a shot in the dark. It was just, this would be fun. This would be great. Let's have a special guest. And he, unbeknownst to us, was a fan of our show. And we're like thrilled that he even considered, and then ended up doing it. And then doing an entire act on our show was just amazing. And watching the crowd, you were at the live show, watching the crowd, because he steps out stage right, and the people who were all the way in the audience stage left, they started to see him first. So it's like there was a ripple effect as he like got in there and crossed over. They were just like, oh my God, it's Will. And it was like a roar, just kind of awakened through the crowd. So it was so exciting. He's obviously a comedy hero of mine, so it was just amazing to direct him.
Yeah, I mean,
it was me saying, oh, you want to stand here? Okay, yeah, sure. That was whatever you want to do, Mr. Farrell.
It was I remember when the when the voice of God said, ladies and gentlemen, former president of the United States, George W. Bush. And at first when they said former president of the United States, I was like, oh shit, Obama's there. But But then when that happened, I was like, what? Huh? And then as I saw it, I was like, wait, no. And so
Now the entire audience did that same thing, like, huh? Wait, no, what? Yay! Like that was
no, we were just like, we were all for that. We were just like, once we saw what was going on, we were just like, oh yeah, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
So, like the Daily Show, there have been some really excellent field pieces that have been done on Full-Frontal, and just some excellent pieces overall. A personal favorite of mine is when Sam talked about, this was before the election, she was talking about how we got to where we are today, and she really emphasized the 2010 elections, and she will keep on emphasizing that, having that flash up on the screens behind her, which I very much commend her for. What has been your personal favorite piece that Full-Frontal has done?
That's a tough one. The studio pieces are all really, really wonderful. And they obviously the field pieces to me are the ones that are even closer to my heart, because those are the ones I work on a lot more closely with my team. I'm really proud of our Russian Trolls piece. I was really thrilled with how that came out, that we had someone on our staff who went through back channels and found these people. And I don't know of any Western media that went to the lengths that we did to find those people, and then to do them in our voice. It was still a fun, interesting, engaging piece. And we beat the media to that story, I thought, which wasn't our plan to beat them. We're not in a race with the mainstream news media, but it was fascinating to me that like our research team caught this trend before other media did. I was really proud of that. And the piece was just awesome and funny. And then it was one of the first things I did with Sam when we got here was we went to Jordan and did a couple of pieces on the Syrian refugees. And that to me was just that was a really special point in the show, because I think it's when we first realized how we need to do field pieces differently from the Daily Show, or at least how the Daily Show had been doing them. Daily Show's evolving in their own right in really, really wonderful ways. And we're trying to evolve ourselves. And we just realized that a lot of the times we're not going to get Mike Huckabee to come on our show and trash Syrian refugees. We're not going to get the people who are sending out the message, the other message where we might be fighting up against. So it was like, how do we tell these stories where we're not going to get those people in the seat? And I feel like we kind of figured that out in those pieces. And then we told a story that is just not funny at all. Syrian refugees it's very sad. It's a very, very hard story to tell on a comedy show. And we made those people human. We showed them to be interesting, human people who could laugh at jokes, which you never see in anything. You don't see refugees laughing. It's amazing that they could laugh. It's amazing they could be in this situation. And it was fun to do a piece, I think, where we were laughing with people, where it wasn't like there was no fake irony of laughing at somebody or they're a prop in our joke that much. They were laughing with us. They were along for the ride. And that was like a revelation, like, oh, they could laugh on camera. We don't have to cut their laugh out. They're with us on this. And that was such a wonderful moment for me. And to tell that story and to share that with an American audience, that refugees are not this boogeyman that they may not to be, was so important to me.
It really was a moving piece. I think the piece you did with Sam and also the one that John Oliver did were both just wonderfully structured and done and touching, but also very funny. And I was very moved by that. So just one sort of last question to well, actually another two. Is there any hope that you feel people should latch onto during these kinds of times? I mean, you're working for a show where it's highlighting all that's wrong right now.
I get that question a lot, and it's funny. Sometimes we'll get blinders on, and we'll get really down and dark, and then sometimes we'll remind ourselves. We have our internal communication server, Slack. We opened up a channel that was just searching for joy. And this happened the other day. We said, we need some more joyful stories. We need to remind ourselves of when people can work together and when good things happen. And people started flooding this channel in our offices here with just story after story after story of joy. And it was even if we don't cover all of those stories, we can't. There were like hundreds of them. It was just a good reminder, like all is not lost. Like we watch the news, or I have it on in my office. See, there's the news right there. It's always in your face, and you get crushed by it. And it was a good reminder, like there's so much good stuff in the world. And another piece that's one of my favorite pieces we did about kind of addressing this is we did it was called Rape Kit 2. I know, comedy gold. But it was this great, wonderful animated piece that we did about how this bipartisan rape kit bill got passed in the Georgia Senate, in the Georgia State Senate, about how this Republican and this Democrat got together to sort of beat the system and work through the Byzantine laws and legislature there. And it was such an uplifting, wonderful piece. And it was like, oh, we can do this on a comedy show too. We can show people that government does work together sometimes. So I think it's just like, it's a good idea to tell people to take a breath. All is not lost. There are still some norms left in our democracy for a little while, hopefully, maybe, probably. And we'll all get through this to the next thing. It's going to take a while to rebuild some of those norms, but it's possible. I think we can do it.
I certainly hope so. Not everything in me is jaded. Most of it is, but not everything. So my last question, since we are an awards site, Full-Frontal has made some breakthroughs at the Emmys. The writing crew got nominated last year, which was awesome. Yep. What I'm wondering is, what episode would you want to submit to the Emmy voters for the program category? Which episode do you think is probably the best example of what you guys have done over the past year?
Yeah, we did submit a few, and I can't remember which one off the top of my head. This is why we do it. This is why we all sit down and we look at them all and do them, because off the top of our heads, there's no way to do it. I don't know what we submitted. They're all awesome. They're all great. I love them all. They're all my babies. It's my Sophie's choice. I don't know.
Do you have a personal favorite that if you were to look at the ones that you've done over the past year that you would choose? I would literally,
I literally would have to go and look and see what we did on what day. I am sadly unprepared for this question. I'm trying to remember what that Rape Kit bill, whatever show that was. It was such a fantastic show, and I hope we may have submitted that one, but I'm not even sure. Gosh, Emmy voters. What should you watch? Just watch all the shows. I don't know. There are not that many of them. We're once a week. What else do you have to do?
They're all on YouTube.
They're on YouTube, and you've already watched The Handmaid's Tale. So let's just catch up.
You hear that, Emmy voters? Take heed. Well, Miles, I can't believe again to thank you enough for this. This was a fantastic interview. The show is fantastic. Full-Frontal with Samantha Bee, Wednesdays at 10 o'clock on TBS. It's one of the best half hours of television you will find. Thanks so much for joining us, and all the best to you this Emmy season.
Thank you so much.